It is the 8th of the 1st 2025, and today we've got to talk about James Allen on F1 podcast, during which they've talked some things about Sir Lewis Hamilton, revealing the details of his contract to an extent that I've not heard in the F1 space since. They've referenced the Lewis Hamilton LinkedIn post. So too, they've broadcast an interview with Fred Vasseur. Talk to a man in Italy who's told you everything you need to know about the status of Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari, what he needs to do, what people are looking at between the relationship that is Sir Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. This is going to get techie, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes you've got to be balanced, because for the avoidance of doubt, we will never ever sacrifice truth, value nor objectivity at the altar of partisanship. We discuss all of the aforementioned under the umbrella heading of, can Lewis Hamilton win an unprecedented 8th Drivers' Championship? The promise unfulfilled. This is gangbuster storytelling as far as F1 is concerned, because again, for the avoidance of doubt, a rising tide floats all boats. Here's what James Allen, together with a couple of his Autosport colleagues in Ben Hunt, chief motorsport writer, and Jake Boxall-Legg, speak about. I will link the podcast below so you can go and listen to it too. First on the docket, they talk about Lewis Hamilton's LinkedIn post. He talks about being an entrepreneur and an investor and an F1 driver in that order. That fills me with woe and dread, ladies and gents, particularly if we're talking about Lewis Hamilton's performance, not insubstantial performance last season. However, some say that Lewis Hamilton needed to touch grass. This is a brand new challenge for him though at Scuderia, moving to Milan, etc. etc. It's a new team, which requires therefore a new attitude. He will be a new man going into 2025, therefore it's a new challenge. He's buying a new apartment in Milan, and that's one of the questions that so many of you will have had. What's he going to do? Is he going to live in Monaco still? Would he move back to the UK? Oh no, he's going to Milan because he realises that there is value in this. No, Lewis Hamilton needs to endear himself to Scuderia in the way that Charles Leclerc has. Indeed, if he's to build himself a championship winning team even, he needs to build that team in his own image, because currently, as at the first month of the 2025 year, I think Charles Leclerc holds the whip hand on that. That's his team, and Lewis Hamilton will need to change for that in real time. Learning the language, moving to Milan, which is a bit far from Fiorano, but still close enough to commute, will help him, therefore endearing himself to that team, Scuderia Ferrari, where we know that matters. This is an Italian team. Understand then the working culture and his relationships with his team will be very different from anything they experience with the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth. James Allen tells a brilliant story about James Allison saying of Michael Schumacher that it was his attention to detail that he knew the names of every single one of his team members, engineers, pit crew, the lot of them. Indeed, after some session, to sit there with his masseurs with a bloody iPad or whatever, a pen and pad as it were at the time in 2000, and he'd write down the names of all of his engineers, all of his team members, and buy them Christmas and birthday presents, bespoke, tailored to their needs. James Allison tells the story how he bought him a super expensive bike, right size. That was how Michael Schumacher, how dedicated that chap was to goodwill, currying favour, fostering rapport, because indeed there is lap time in that. Lewis Hamilton, if he's to get the 8th, will need to do things like this. That's the extent, the levels of commitment, the levels of attention to detail requisite. So too, James Allen talks about this will be a different change, though, a challenge, therefore, that as far as the steering wheel on that Ferrari car, Project 677 or whatever they're calling it now, there's 25 different buttons he'll have to learn. It's like, says one of his colleagues, Ben Hunt or Jake Boxall-Legg, it's like transferring from being a PC gamer to becoming an Xbox gamer. That's the sort of transition we're talking about here. It's going to get techie. However, there is a school of thought that all of this change and transition for Sir Lewis Hamilton will be good. It's exactly what the doctor ordered. He needs to go and touch grass, breathe some fresh air even. That in joining Scuderia at 40, it would be the fountain of youth that Sir Lewis will want to drink from. Therefore, that the move can be something of a youth serum per se. but it will be tough. But we know of Sir Lewis, if I'm going to compliment that chap for a second, give him his flowers, that if you tell Sir Lewis there's something that he can't do, he will react to that. No, weaponise it, just as Maximilian Verstappen, for some say soon to be 5-time champion, has made an industry out of. So too, they pitched this at one Frederick Vasseur, because he's the one with his finger on the pulse now. He's the one with whom Lewis would have been negotiating. Indeed, there would be no deal between Lewis and Scuderia Ferrari, notwithstanding John Elkann wanting it to happen, if not for Frederick Vasseur, team principal. They have tenure, length of service together. They worked back in the day at ART when Lewis Hamilton was a young but a proper dragon, fire-breathing dragon back in the day. Here's what Frederick Vasseur had to say. When asked if he's confident that Lewis can return to the zenith of his performance mountaintop, Frederick Vasseur had this to say. He says that he's more confident that Lewis can deliver beyond 40 years old. Well, why? Because the difference is his motivation. The decision to move to Ferrari, he says, is born out of Lewis wanting to optimise for his chances of winning a championship. And here's where it gets techier than techie things. In 25, 26 and 27. We knew that Lewis had moved because he wanted a multi-year deal. But most people, most F1 aficionados said 2 year. If Frederick Vasseur is to be taken at face value, it is 3 years. And we'll get to the price of that. He was asked, Lewis, by Frederick Vasseur, if you want to do that, if you want to optimise for your chances of winning in 25, 26 or 27, do you go to Scuderia or do you stay at Ferrari? Lewis's answer was a resounding Scuderia Ferrari, with impunity, without compunction. And according to the guys and girls over at Autosport, Jake Boxall-Legg says around the cost of that deal, it was rumoured to be anywhere up to $100 million US. Jake says, in stark contrast to James Allen's understanding on the podcast, that contract is worth anywhere between 50 and 55 million US dollars per annum over 3 years. Still a very big contract, a little less than we anticipated, but still, I mean, it's not pittance. He'll survive. Do you know what I mean? He won't be struggling to pay his bills, will Sir Lewis. But why would Ferrari pay this? Well, we understand that their strategic objectives are, of course, to grow the bloody business, build a luxury brand, no longer a sports car brand. But if we're putting our performance lenses on, Frederick Vasseur says we need the performance package. It needs to be the technical feedback that Carlos Sainz gave us, but also that performance on Sundays, so too performance on Saturday too. That on track stuff, the experience that a 7-time champion in Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton comes with. Indeed, Lewis for Scuderia Ferrari, he will be their North Star. The chap, the driver, the champion who will enable them to garner, download that championship winning experience. You cannot buy that. Some will say in that context that Sir Lewis Hamilton is cheap at 55 million US dollars a year. Oh, and they talk to their man in Italy to see what they're saying on the ground. Now, this is where we get divergence, because there's one portion of the Tifosi, the Italian press and media, that are saying that Lewis Hamilton will absolutely come in and hit the ground running, that it will be a collaborative effect epitomised between Lewis and Charles Leclerc, that it will be a mentor-mentee relationship. And of course, in that situation, if that's true, a rising relationship tide for Scuderia Ferrari will float all boats, that the dynamic between Lewis and Charles will be a good one. Frederick Vasseur concurs. He says he thinks that they'll work well, will Charles and Lewis, that their temperaments are almost equal. It's a very different dynamic to whatever you've seen at Mercedes between King George and Sir Lewis, who some say didn't get on massively. These two in Leclerc, modern day Journalese, and Sir Lewis Hamilton will get on. Some say that they're both mild-mannered and it will be all daisies and roses. However, on the other side of that Tifosi fence, some are saying it's going to get techie, that it will be a struggle for modern day Journalese, aka Charles Leclerc, to manage, to cope, for having probably, some say, the first mainstream superstar in F1 in F1 history alongside him on the other side of the garage? How does he manage for that attention deficit? How will he react when all of the cameras potentially are focused on Lewis Hamilton rocking up to a Grand Prix weekend? And therein lies the techiness. However, you guys have heard me speak a gazillion times about my skepticism, that I'm fearful of Lewis Hamilton's ability, no probability, to win himself an unprecedented 8th World Championship, particularly on the back of last season's races. He wasn't at his best. He hadn't had his Weetabix. But again, the line of argument goes that in going across the Scuderia Ferrari, he can dust off his shoulders, recapture his prime. But I say all of that to say this. This is going to get techier than techie things. Chat next year. I'm telling you why. Well, because if Lewis Hamilton can climb that very steep mountaintop, he will be breathing rarefied air, because he does it not despite his challenge, but because of them. And they are multitudinous, aren't they? Where he's come from, how the media dealt with him, 2011, 2012 settings. He's wrestling with the W13, 14 and 15 over the past 3 years. Criticisms from the likes of Brundle et al., Ralf Schumacher too. Everybody's been super critical of Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton, 7-time champion. But if indeed he can get his SH1T together, rest assured he'd be breathing rarefied, no unprecedented air. Here's what I mean. Prost won at Williams in 1993, but he wasn't 40 years old then. You guys have heard me say on a gazillion occasions, there's only been 3 40-year-old champions in F1 history. Niki Lauda in 1984, when he came back and won, was not one. You can count the amount of 40-year-old champions on one hand in F1 history. It's Giuseppe Nino Farina in 1950, the original one, the first one, rookie season for both him and Formula One. Fangio was 46 in 1957. Jack Brabham was over 40 in 1966. Those are the only 3, and they happened 100 years ago. Nobody's not going to tell me that F1 isn't a different game, a completely different equation that these automotive pugilists need to solve for in 2025. As first is the last time when it happened in 1966. Jack Brabham settings. The last driver to win over 35 years old. Non-rhetorical question. Guess who that was? That was Damon in 1996. That, ladies and gentlemen, was nearly... That was 30 years ago, right? What are we doing here? This, I say all of the aforementioned to say it will be difficult for Sir Lewis Hamilton. But Sir Lewis as an equation, as far as his unique brand of automotive pugilism, his length of service and tenure, the achievements that he's done, 7-time champion. Let's read them out. 105 race wins, 202 podiums, 4,862.5 points, 104 pole positions, 7 champions, 60. You get the picture. I say all of that as far as the records to say that in Lewis Hamilton, we're dealing with a different circumstance. Note a paradigm shift as far as F1 drivers. Some would say that there's never been anybody quite like Lewis Hamilton before, nor will there be anybody since, in his ability to juggle both performance par excellence on the track and all of his extracurricular activities outside the track. Toto, the boy who cried wolf, tells the story of 2018 Singapore quali, that he was super concerned because all of the shareholders were asking questions. Why is Lewis promoting all of these brands? We've got a race to win. The car's not going to be quick at Singapore. Lewis Hamilton jet sets and goes and does all of his extracurricular fashion-centric activities. Comes back for the Singapore 2018 Grand Prix race weekend with a next to no difference, 0 sleep, and puts in one of the goatiest laps that you've ever seen in your life. I say all of that to say that Lewis is different. If we're forward forecasting based on precedent, I don't think that there's an equal and opposite. I don't think that we're talking apples and apples here when we reference Prost and Hill and Lauda and even Brabham and Farina and Fangio back in the day. Lewis Hamilton is different to them. No, he's racing in a different time. You can argue that there's never been a driver operating at his level, times the length of service and tenure for this long. So what's the benchmark then, Cam? What's the source of your skepticism for Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton going into 2025? What's the benchmark? Well, I'll conclude with this. Maybe, ladies and gentlemen, there isn't one. Because every once in a while there comes along a driver who moves the goalpost across in real time, is a paradigm shift of an F1 peddler. Indeed, they recalibrate exactly what could be expected from a Formula One driver. There is a driver currently on the grid that's done that. He has a name, and his name, ladies and gentlemen, is Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. What are we doing here?